It's common knowledge nowadays that Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, aka the Captain as he's now called, is an overt Superman ripoff. This was even proven in a court of law when DC sued the original publishers for Captain Marvel, Fawcett Comics. This court case lasted 12 years, which is crazy to think nowadays considering the fact that DC owns Shazam. What isn't common knowledge is just how influential Shazam is. Just his costume alone inspired one of the most influential musicians of all time, Elvis Presley. And Billy Batson's ability to switch between a small, frail body and a far more powerful one is one of the most pivotal modern tropes in comic books. And then there's my personal favorite, the other Captain Marvel. Admit it, you forgot what this video was about. No, this is about Miracle Man. Welcome to hell. To make a very long, very legally vague story shorter, basically, after Captain Marvel got cancelled due to that lawsuit from DC, a British publishing company called L. Miller & Son decided to rip off Captain Marvel and just keep printing it under a different name. And thus the character of Marvel Man was born. All they did was shift a few proper nouns and designs around. This was outright theft in a way that Shazam did not commit towards Superman. His hair recolored from black to blonde, and he lost the cape, giving him a sharper, more aggressive silhouette. Instead of exclaiming Shazam to transform into his adult body, Mikey shouted Kimota. The big red cheese was now the big blue baboon. Characters like Mary Marvel and Dr. Shyvana became Kid Marvel Man and Dr. Gargunza. A few tweaked designs and they were off to the races to commit straight up copyright infringement towards a company that couldn't even be publishing original stories themselves at the time. But the character was a success, getting over 300 issues to his name and being remembered fondly by British comic fans for decades. Flash forward to 1982 when the folks at Warrior Magazine are those comic fans grown up and they want to revisit the character of Marvel Man. In steps Alan Moore, who hadn't done anything massive at the time, but who would later go on to write V for Vendetta, Watchmen, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and my favorite, Swamp Thing. Moore wrote a new Marvel Man story with the simple pitch of what would have happened to the little boy who changed into Marvel Man, now called Miracle Man, after 22 years. Well, Mike Moran is now depressed, quiet, and doesn't even remember being Miracle Man. He only has recurring nightmares about flying until one day, while being taken hostage by eco-terrorists, he finally remembers the magic word that transforms him into a superhero. And in a flash, he remembers everything. What's wrong with this story is that no one else remembers Miracle Man at all. The closest thing I can compare Alan Moore's Miracle Man to is, funnily enough, Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's a work created by someone who clearly has a very deep-seated frustration with the kind of people that the work is being marketed to. It's a piece of art that can turn into a never-ending loop of needless symbolism and pseudo-religious beliefs at its worst moments, and it's something that was intended to have one conclusive ending, but now has several reboots, failed sequels, legal entanglements, and has kind of become a mockery of what it originally set out to achieve. It's also one of my favorite comic books ever. Miracle Man, in its entirety, is a book about human decay, how power can corrupt or delude, and most importantly, how superheroes, at the end of the day, if left unchecked and unscrutinized, are inherently a fascist concept. Mike Moran himself is a complicated character because, frankly, he sucks. He has no real form or identity. He's working a dead-end job, his relationship with his wife is tense, he's out of shape, he's anxious, I could go on. But Michael's greatest character trait is the fact that he's nothing special. But can't he transform into Miracle Man? Doesn't that make him special? Miracle Man can fly, he can shoot light from his hands, he's damn near invulnerable, he could feasibly live for centuries, he can read minds, and he's a certified genius. Doesn't that make Mike special? No. Because Michael is not Miracle Man. Not long into Moore's run on MM, he reveals the dark secret. Miracle Man wasn't some little boy gifted powers by an old wizard who taught him a magic word and the power of responsibility. He's a science experiment. He's a lab rat exposed to technology that scientists found in a crashed alien spaceship. Technology that allows two bodies, two consciousnesses, to coexist, to occupy the same space in reality and swap control of that space when using a subliminally planted phrase. Kimota. Michael is not a superhero. He simply shares the same physical space with the being called Miracle Man. Miracle Man has his own personality, his own goals, his own dreams, and he resents the squishy, quivering, crying human that he's a product of. The adventures that they went on throughout the 50s and 60s? Never happened. Merely computer simulations that a scientist subjected 3 young orphaned boys to based on a comic book he once briefly glanced at. A comic book titled Captain Marvel. And the scientist's name? Gargunza. Dr. Gargunza, a Nazi, a bloodthirsty monster with delusions of creating the perfect man, subjected 3 children to the most soul-shattering scientific process imaginable, essentially creating 3 super beings who reside within them, and those super beings want out. No one even remembers the Miracle Man family because they never made a public appearance. Hell, the only time they were let out of their lab, they were hit by a nuclear bomb. This, in turn, gave Mike the amnesia that plagued him at the start of the book. But what happened to the others? His sidekicks, Dickie Dauntless, aka Young Miracle Man, and the youngest of the group that we'll get to later. Well, Dickie, sadly, didn't survive the blast. His bodies were mid-swap when the blast hit him, and what was left of their combined corpse was nicknamed the Exploded Thing by the aliens who created this technology. And then there's the most innocent and youngest team member. There's no true central villain in Moore's Miracle Man saga, but there absolutely is someone who poses the greatest threat to Earth throughout the entire story: Miracle Man's youngest sidekick, Johnny Bates, aka Kid Miracle Man, aka KMM. Maybe the most disgusting and reprehensible villain I've ever read in a comic book. You see, in 1963, while Mike reverted back to being a regular kid and grew up oblivious to his past as a hero, Johnny never turned back into his regular self. He's been living for 22 years as Kid Miracle Man. Trigger warning. Skip to this time in the video to avoid the topic of sexual assault. It's not that KMM became a monster, it's more like he was always this way and was just finally let off the leash. Some of the spin-off material goes further into this, but KMM is explicitly a sadist, a psychopath, a racist, a murderer, and a rapist. Unlike a lot of later comics that would use assault as a cheap shock to disturb readers, Moore uses the topic very deliberately in his time on Miracle Man. Because when Johnny first got these powers, he was 7 years old, and his adult form was only 16. But shockingly, he's managed to keep most of this under wraps. He even becomes extremely wealthy thanks to an electronics company that he's the head of called Sunburst. Until one day, his old pal Mike Moran visits him. Michael sees right through KMM's plastered smile and sees him for the monster that he is. They fight, and Miracle Man manages to trick the monster into saying his own activation phrase, reverting him back to 7-year-old Johnny Bates. Johnny is committed to a mental hospital for the rest of his days. Those are just the first 2 issues of Miracle Man, and I'm going to put a massive spoiler warning here going forward, because to understand what this book is trying to say, I do have to recap the rest of the plot. Seek it out, read it, but again, massive content warning. This book is dire. A lot happens very quickly in this book, and it's kind of mind-melting, so feel free to pause and rewind if necessary, because I'm about to throw a lot of nouns at you. The aliens I mentioned earlier, the Quees as they're known, show up. They explain that the other bodies, the people that they and the Miracle Man family aren't using whenever they swap, still technically exist in another layer of reality that they call the underspace. Think of it like a character select screen. It's just this empty void where they can look through all of the possible bodies they want to swap into. Because of this, they have an extremely odd relationship with morality, communication, and just a sense of what self is. They're briefly at war with another alien race called the Warpsmiths until they decide to join forces after an event we'll talk about later. Meanwhile, Miracle Man and Michael's wife have conceived a baby that rapidly grows, is born in graphic detail, and then gains sentience at a disturbingly fast rate. This prompts the long-lost and frankly disturbing Miracle Woman to re-emerge. She positions herself as Miracle Man's only true partner and equal. This emasculates Michael, and after a lot of rumination, he decides to essentially commit suicide, to never transform back. Now both Michael Moran and his wife of many years, Liz, are dissolved from this book. Humanity is rapidly leaving these issues as they begin to form a new group, almost a pantheon of gods. At the same time, Johnny Bates is fighting an internal battle that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. KMM is still very active, just only within Johnny's mind. This monster just keeps taunting him, begging him, insulting him, and trying any other underhanded tactic to get Johnny to let the beast out, to swap with him again. Johnny is eventually released from his room and allowed to mingle with the other children in the mental hospital. Johnny still stands strong, refusing to release the devil inside of him. Again, jump to this time code to avoid the topic of sexual assault. One day, Johnny is cornered in a bathroom, and the most sadistic bully of the group, in maybe the most difficult-to-read page of a comic book I've ever seen, assaults Johnny. Johnny, with tears in his eyes, apologizing to the boys, releases KMM. By the time Miracle Man and his new pantheon, the Warp Smiths, a homeless man who can control fire named Huey Moon, and Miracle Woman all arrive, it's too late. 80s London no longer exists. It's a monument to evil. A fight ensues, with KMM outpacing nearly everyone present. What happens next is vague. The book even goes into detail on how this fight in the future becomes a major event for nearly every world religion. But in reality, one of the Warp Smiths just makes KMM endure so much pain that he's forced to swap with Johnny to make it all stop. Innocent Johnny Bates, who's had one of the worst lives in comic book fiction, is cradled by Miracle Man, who solves the problem of KMM once and for all with a very quick snap. The rest of the book is paced extremely quickly. Miracle Man decides to take control of the Earth by force. He erases the concept of money, they completely de-arm every nation on Earth, work to reform the prison system, cure diseases, terraform dying climates, restore the ozone layer, they even build an afterlife. It's all paradise. People even begin volunteering to undergo the same horrible, painful procedure that Mike and his two sidekicks underwent all those years ago. It's now a world of superheroes. So that was a lot of really heavy subject material to throw at you, and a lot of needlessly complicated lore too, but it was important to break down the entire miniseries to really get at the heart of what Moore is going for here. Miracle Man, under the pen of Alan Moore, is a story where an impossibly strong Nazi super experiment decides to take over the world. And he's the protagonist. This isn't Moore being needlessly edgy. It's Moore addressing what he sees as the big paradox of superheroes.
It has serious and worrying implications for the future if millions of adults are queuing up to see Batman movies, because that kind of infantilization can be very often a precursor to fascism.
Miracle Man, at least to me, is kind of a warning from Moore. Moore is trying to posit that no matter how fallible and relatable you can make a superhero, they're still elevated beyond humanity. They'll always be selfish. Not necessarily in the extreme ways that KMM was selfish, but they will always see themselves as correct. They'll always wind up as fascists. In superhero media, stories about people who are impossibly strong, can solve all the world's problems, and are never wrong is very coddling, unless we examine it closely and hold it accountable for that fact. Now, I don't agree with this sentiment in the slightest, but it is what Moore believes. It's why Miracle Man is such a damn overpowered hero. He and his cast of characters perform such ridiculously impossible feats that it's no longer dazzling to read. It's almost cold and clinical. It's a child's idea of God. Oh, he just solves all the world's problems overnight. Moore even mocks the idea of relatable heroes with the final closing moment of the book, with Miracle Man saying he's just like a regular human, while donning an outwardly authoritarian outfit and sipping drinks with aliens, a fire deity, and his alien replica clone bride. It's why this book opens with Nietzschean quotes about Zarathustra, possibly the most misinterpreted philosophical text in human history, because it inspired the rise of fascism in Germany. Nietzsche never intended his words to be read as seize power, merely that people should be willing to grow. Superhero comic authors never intended their work to be read as never grow up, but some people do read them with that mindset. Miracle Man himself misinterprets his own power as carte blanche to never allow humanity to grow without his supervision. Moore believes that humanity cannot progress unless it abandons the childish concept of a guy in blue tights. Just like Nietzsche declared that God is dead, Moore declared that we need to kill the idealized form of Superman before his grip on us becomes too great to escape. This is partially why I think Alan Moore requested that his name be removed from the book in any modern reprints. He wanted to give all credit to the original creator of Marvel Man, yes, but in a broader sense, I see Moore getting really frustrated that he tried to stop this superhero hype train, and it instead became a successful book that is still being elaborated on even now. He didn't stop the train, he laid some of the strongest, most pivotal tracks for modern comic books. Because yes, there were more Miracle Man stories that followed, primarily penned by horrible monster Neil Gaiman. I won't talk about them too long, but they delve really deep into the minutia of what the world under the rule of Miracle Man would be. They bring back Dickie Dauntless and a few other key characters, and it ends on a cliffhanger. If you absolutely positively have to read everything Miracle Man, either sail the 7 seas for these books or buy them secondhand. Don't let Gaiman see a single red cent of your hard-earned money. Thankfully, they're also trapped in development hell, which is right where Neil Gaiman can go to. As of right now, everyone involved has dropped this book, and the planned 3rd volume is never going to be released. It truly baffles me to my core that Gaiman could start working on a book about unchecked power, consent, and how true evil is personified in a whiny little dark-haired British dude, while being that evil himself. It's also really frustrating as a fan of Miracle Man to want this book to have a conclusion, but also to desperately want it to not be written by Gaiman. I'm happy that Gaiman is no longer getting work, and I truly do not want to see him finish his version of this story, but I do wish the story of Miracle Man as a whole at least had an ending. But the strangest loop in this Gordian knot of psychosexual nightmares and legal entanglements is that Marvel Comics now owns the rights to Miracle Man, and they plan on integrating him into the mainline Marvel comic universe. A character designed to show the ugliness and evil of the lie that superheroes perpetuate is about to be shoulder to shoulder with Spider-Man. I'm hesitantly intrigued to see where that goes. Thank you all for watching. Wow, that was a really long-winded, heavy video about one of my favorite comic books ever made. Consider donating to my Patreon if you have the time. It lets me spend more money on volumes of Miracle Man, and it also goes towards my upcoming comic book, Destitute.